What is going on, guys? Benny here. We are here today to talk about this beautiful component. I love it in black compared to silver. This is the Schiit Audio Vidar 2, and we'll get into it after the intro. Alright guys, so we are here today, like I said in the intro, talking about this guy, the Schiit Audio Vidar 2. So, if you don't know anything about Schiit Audio, you've kind of been, and it's kind of like the beginner of your journey, you've been kind of living under a rock, because this is like one of the most popular companies when it comes to American affordable hi-fi. So with that, this is not their super top of the line. This is like their more affordable, in the middle of the road, probably end game for most people. So with that, I'll throw up the specs here, but I'll go over them as well, just briefly. So there was a version of this before, which was just the Vidar, which I think came out 6 years ago. It's 2023 now, so yeah, 7 years ago now, I believe. But they did make a few changes. So the changes between Vidar 1 and Vidar 2. Before, it didn't have this beautiful standby button. But when they made a Schiit, which is their more Class A leaning amplifier, which is also with that, you get that more Class A sound, but it is lower voltage. It is lower watts than this guy. So with that, the difference is, like I said, is this standby button that they decided to add up there. I'll throw up some B-roll here. There are a couple of things. Before, it didn't really have a standby mode. You had to go in the back of this, and there's a switch back here, and you just have to added that standby button. A lot of people were complaining about that. I completely agree. So happy they added that. Another thing that they did change was they upgraded the power supply in this guy, which is really good, because now, because of that, and they also changed some of the components in here as well, made them a little bit more high quality, which is great. And with that, they basically, what they do now, with the old Vidar 1, it didn't really have a 4-ohm rating. And now that they upgraded those components as well as the power supply, we get a 4-ohm rating in stereo, which is pretty awesome. So it goes from 100 watt, if you're running this in stereo, you'd be running it at 100 watts per channel at 8 ohms, and then in 4 ohms it doubles that, so it's 200 watts per channel in the 4 ohms. And then if you had 2 of these, which you can run these in just straight monoblocks with XLR, you would be hitting 400 watts per channel, which is insane at 8 ohms. But they don't have a 4-ohm rating for using these as monoblocks. But you probably could, just not like crazy loud, and it would probably just trip off by itself anyways to save itself. So I'm going to throw some B-roll on here. I want to kind of go over a couple of the things that are a little frustrating, but it's for the safety of the amp. So on the front, when you plug this guy in immediately, it'll come out of standby mode, but you'll have, like I'm showing right here, is this light. It takes about 30 seconds, and it'll blink and blink and blink, and then it'll have one light on this side, and then it'll flip to the right side, as you can see. If you're coming from standby mode, and then you push the button to turn it on, to go into powered mode, it does take a little bit longer, because I don't really understand the science behind it, but I'm assuming it's because it's already warmed up, so you would think it'd be the other way, right? But I think it's just because it has running power inside of it. It has to double check to make sure that all the little electronics inside are at the proper voltage, which is fine because then it saves this lovely amp here. So for me, I would have to say this is a chunky boy in terms of weight, not in size, but weight. So with this guy, this is a Class AB amplifier. So it's old school, as they say, in the new school of modern tech. So this doesn't take up much space, but is an old school Class AB at heart. So this guy, I may be a stronger dude, but because they upgraded that power supply in this guy, it's about 22 pounds, like a 22-pound brick. This isn't very big, but it's dense, super dense. I don't even want to open it. But with that, you do have your heat fins here, and when it comes to the heat on this guy, even running it at like full tilt where it's like so loud and pulling like almost that 100, like 80 watts, like 60 watts, like consecutively out of like all my speakers that I have here. Bleeding louds are about 60, 70 watts in terms of inside my garage. Otherwise it just gets way too loud. But with that, this guy doesn't get very warm. He gets warm, but it's not like if I put my hand on this heatsink on the sides, you can't even feel it. They did such a good job at heat dissipation with this guy. And with the old one, it was a little bit warmer, but because I'm assuming because they updated all the components and the power supply in here, everything is well regulated so it doesn't overheat. Another thing is when it's in standby mode, it goes from sucking like 40, 35 watts out of the wall to 1 to 2 watts is what Schiit Audio claims. I did measure it with my kilowatt, and it's more around along the lines of like 6 to 10. And I tried resetting that a few times to see if it was giving me wrong information, but that's about what I see. And that was me just running the amp straight into the kilowatt in the wall. And it's fine because it's better than 30 to 40, just sucking power out of the wall. So it does save you a decent amount of wattage just sitting here using this standby switch. So when we come around the back, I will put up some a couple of things in some B-roll here. So on the back, we have the binding posts for left and right, and then we have the 2 RCA single endeds for the left and right channel, and then you have the XLR in the center for that mono channel if you're going to use this as a mono block. And then you have your power plug insert and your switch. So if another thing I think I did this in post, Ben put the B-roll after this, but with that, if you are running this in monoblock, it's kind of strange because you would assume you'd want to use a red binding post and a black binding post, but as you can see here on the right side, it's negative, and then the left side is positive on the top red ones if you are running this in as a monoblock, which would be really cool to have 2 of these and run them at 400 watts. But because that would be really cheap, because these are only, if at the website, they're about 800 bucks. So after taxes and shipping, I live in Arizona, they're in California, it's like 890, 880 something, with some change. But that's like 1700 bucks for 2 of these to run a mono at 400 watts per channel. And then their tiers that they came out in 2022. When those came out, those are way bigger. they're like this much bigger, I believe, in terms of like how wide they are as a component. They're also heavier because they have that choke inside of it, that super old school choke. And with that, those are a lot more expensive. I think those are $14.99 each, and those are only mono blocks. So with that, you do get, I would say, get a jump in quality in terms of sound that you're getting out of it. But if you just need sheer power, like pulling out at 8 ohms, remember they're not 4 ohm rated. The tiers are 4 ohm rated at their, I don't know what their specifications are in terms of like power output, but I know it's a lot more than this, and it's rated for it. So if you're gonna run like Magnepans or something like that, the tiers would probably be a better choice than these. But yeah, if you're running smaller speakers or speakers that are higher sensitivity that don't like take a really low ohm load, and you know it's like 8 to 6 ohms when it's coming out like from your speakers, then I'd say this would be a safe bet if you're gonna mono block them. So with that, I did notice when this came, there are, on the fins themselves, these are really hard to make. So when it comes to making heat sinks, it's difficult. There are a couple nicks here and there on them in terms of quality control, but you're not going to be really touching the fins. So it's not like, oh my God, I'm going to touch this and cut myself. Okay, who does that on an amp, right? So with that, for me, I like the black ones. I like how it's silver up here and then black on top, and it's very Darth Vader-ish. The silver ones, silver for Schiit audio, is kind of basic because they've always done silver. So being that the black ones are actually a little bit cheaper, I think the silver ones of these guys are about $50 more, which makes sense because they have to do a little bit more in terms of quality control on the smoothness of it and making it the actual finish more even and stuff like that, because it is just like a pressed piece of aluminum. So with that, I've kind of rambled the whole 13 minutes about stuff, right? So I ran this, I did a few tests because I like, in terms of amps, when I'm listening to them, I like using things that have pre-outs but aren't necessarily made to be used for like a whole system. They're more meant for like active speakers on a desk. So I used my L amp from JDS Labs to use the pre-outs on that to control the volume of this. I used my little liquid spark back there, used the pre-outs on that to use the volume for this. And then Schiit was really nice and they sent me the Saga Plus back there, which I also used for volume of this. So in terms of the actual sound of this guy, I would have to call it clean. It's super clean. It never feels sluggish ever. And when it comes to the actual tonal of it, it's a little bit on the warm side, but it's not so much warmth where it's like super rich and like everything is just all lush and blah 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 like a tube. It's not like that. It's not like a tube amp like that, but it is on the slightly warmer side. So if you want something a little bit more analytical, you'd probably have to go more on Class D side. But the best part about like Class A, B and having amps and components that are slightly more on the warm side is you can listen for longer listening sessions, which is, in my book, that's all I'd want to do, is just sit there and listen to music all day long, right? And that's one thing about this guy too that I did notice, is it's not just an amp in terms of it's lively. It, like I said, it doesn't pull punches. It's The power is there when it's there. And that's really all you can ask for from an amp. It's not the fastest amp in the world in terms of like if you compared it to a Class D amp, but when it comes to musicality and how it sounds for overall most music, it does exactly what it needs to do. So with my little test, I know this is going to be a longer review, but with my little test using the L amp as the potentiometer, the Liquid Spark, and the Saga, which one was best? Well, it's a little bit, so there's different flavors on with each one, which is kind of cool because then you understand that, again, this is clean and it puts out whatever its preamp asks for. So when it comes to the L amp, when I was using it with this guy, it was a little bit harsh, but that's because, again, those aren't really meant for this type of application. But yeah, it's a little bit harsh and a little bit too bright for my taste with the L amp, but it does work. With the Liquid Spark, I was super surprised because I love the sound of tubes and warmth. And what was kind of crazy was when I went from using the L amp, which is a $300+ headphone amplifier as the preamp for this, I'd choose the Liquid Spark over that because it has a lot more tube sound involved, because that headphone amplifier, in terms of the Liquid Spark, is a lot warmer sounding and sounds more like it has tubes in it than the L amp. So the L amp's more of like analytical, clean, and just a little bright up top. Liquid Spark, warm, lush, not super fast, but it makes this sound really good. But you can tell that it's not meant for that, because once you start going up in the volume for the Liquid Spark for this, it starts to get harsh in the highs, and then you can hear it like it's not clean anymore, and it's just pushing all the warmth. But at lower volumes, the Liquid Spark with this guy sounds great. It sounds so good. So if you listen to like lo-fi or anything that has more of a warmer presentation, that's a really good combination. So I'm gonna do a review of the Saga Plus on its own as well, because I did use another amp with it. That'll be a little bit later. But with this guy, how does it sound? Match made in heaven. A match made in heaven for sure. So one of the things that, I had one of my friends come by, he's not an audiophile, I'm kind of trying to turn him into one. When I had him listen to the other two, and then I had him listen to the Saga Plus, he wanted to know why the Saga Plus, like when you make it louder, you gotta have it still at that 2 o'clock, like 3 o'clock on the volume knob to have it be somewhat loud. And he's just like, why is it so low? But you have to turn it all the way up on the volume. And it's like, well, on the other ones, they're really loud on the lower end. And I just kind of had to explain to him, I was like, well, those have more gain. The Saga Plus has no gain. It's just one for one, whatever the volume's at, it's what it is. Which is great, because then you know that the Saga Plus is very even, and it does use that relay ladder. So then each channel is matched, and you know that the power to each side is even. So that's one thing with the Saga Plus. I won't go too far into that. But when you listen to it on the Saga Plus, that's really meant for this amp, it's a big deal, because what happens is the cleanliness of this amp comes out, and then when you run it in passive mode, yeah, super clean, does exactly what it needs to do, and it's a matter-of-fact type of listening. When you turn it on the the active mode where you have that little tube on top, yeah, I just used a stock tube. I didn't tube roll it or anything, just came from Schiit Audio. What it does is, even though it says it's 0 gain, it does boost the signal a little bit more. So you do end up hearing a wider sound stage. You end up hearing a little bit more of a holographic sound in terms of depth, as well as height, which is pretty interesting. And what's pretty cool is I was breaking in these Vanguards, which is pretty awesome. I love those speakers. Yeah, those are the Vanguard speakers from XSA Labs. Beautiful speakers. They're more monitors than anything, so they're more meant for like mid to like closer listening. But neither here nor there. Where was I going with that? Yeah, so with the Saga Plus, when you have those pairs and the company knows that pair in combination is good, I would say 100% of the time go with that combination, because they know their shit. But yeah, they know what they're doing when they say, okay, the Saga is more meant to be used with this. Their Freya Plus or Freya N or Freya S is more for like the Azure or Tier amps, which makes sense. And with that, I do say this is the first time I've heard the Vidar 2, and when it comes to the Vidar 2, it does do better things in terms of the Vidar 1. But if you already have the Vidar 1, I wouldn't say you have to go out there and grab this guy. I wouldn't say it's much different, but you do hear it in terms of the actual noise floor. So when I remember, then this is all off memory, guys. This is all like a long time ago. So when I heard the first Vidar, you do, not that you, like when you, it's the same thing you do with headphones when you have the volume off, nothing playing, you jam up the freaking volume, you want to see where the noise floor is. From what I can tell, is this guy's noise floor is a lot lower. You can't hear anything even when it's like at 5 to 6 o'clock with nothing. It's really hard to hear anything from this. But I remember from the older one, when you'd get up to that 4 o'clock, 3 o'clock on like a regular Saga, you could hear it. So they definitely made big strides when it comes to upgrading the power supply as well as the components in this guy. And I would say this is a great buy. If you don't want to hold out and you want a really good Class AB amplifier that puts out 100 watts per channel at 8 ohm, 200 watts at 4 ohm, 400 watts in monoblock 8 ohm, this would be a great choice if you're gonna spend around $800 to $900 after tax. So with that, battery died. All right, so with that, guys, I would have to say when it comes to the Schiit Audio Vidar 2, go get it. Go get it. If you've got $900 and you want something that has that much power, clean power, slightly warm, sounds great, good soundstage, takes on the actual traits of your preamp. If you have a really good preamp, tube preamp, solid state preamp, it will take on those traits. And with that, I would say, guys, completely recommended. I will see you in the next review, and it'll probably be the Triangle BR02 BTs. I just saw Z's review, and I would say he is spot on that. But I have a couple more things to go over that he didn't touch on. But with that, guys, like I said, go grab this guy. If you got 900 bucks, go grab it. You'll love it. And I will see you in the next review. Later, guys. Actually, I forgot to plug something. So with that, guys, please subscribe, comment, do all the cool things, but I am gonna put down below, I did just start a Patreon for the channel, but with your guys' support, if I could get some people on there, a decent amount, hopefully someday, then you guys can support the channel. I think I put in tier 2. I think that's $8 or $10. I don't remember, but go over there. But with that, with you guys that are actually in the higher tiers, you can select what I would buy next with that Patreon money, so then we can review that, so then I can review whatever you guys want me to review, not just what I get in and what I want to review, which is why you guys, like, I would love more subscribers, obviously more people, because when it comes to being able to review what you guys want, I'll probably set up some type of spreadsheet or something on a queue line of who asked for what to be reviewed next, and then that would go into the next review item. So with that, guys, I'll see you in the next one. Please go to my Patreon and also subscribe. I'll see you guys in the next review. Later.